To show exactly how difficult it is to make choices, we've asked a few kids to come in today, and we've provided them with several choices. Let's see how they do. What if I told you that right now I was prepared to give you the title to a 1989 Dodge Caravan? Check this out, Sam. It's got a flip key. This could be yours. Or
Legos.
Well, you answered that really quickly, Sam. Are you sure you don't want to think that through a little bit? This could be yours right now. I'm willing to hand this to you, Kaylee. Or I could also give you this Poppy doll.
Huh? I have a sunset shimmer car. I have a lot of stuff in those anyway.
You have Shimmer.
Sunset shimmer.
I'm sorry, you don't have to yell. I could offer you this Star Wars Lego set.
I like the Star Wars Lego set. I want the Star Wars.
The Star Wars? Are you sure you want the Legos? You want the Legos. Okay. Or I'm gonna give you this Poppy doll. A deed to this charming 5-bedroom, 3-bath bungalow with 10 acres of property in upstate New York. You could sign the deed and it could be yours today. Or
What's that? Oreos?
what does it look like to you?
Oreos.
Are you sure you don't want to rethink that?
I don't want to rethink that.
All you had to do was write your name and you could get a fully funded 401k retirement plan. Or would you rather have this kitten?
The kitten. Kitten. It's gonna be the kitten.
It's gonna be the kitten. She does seem to like you. You already have a kitty?
The cat looks.
The cat. Oh, okay. I think the cat's made a choice as well. You sure you still want these cookies?
So cute. Now listen, how many of you guys, and be totally honest here, how many of you guys are choosing the kitten over the fully funded 401k? All right, a few of you, good. Listen, here's what sort of this video gets at one of the ideas behind this series that we've been in that we're wrapping up today called I Choose. And last week, we actually talked about this one simple idea, but man, it was a powerful idea, is that there are times that we make choices, and the choices that we make, we trade away the things we want most for what we want now. The Oreo cookies look great, right? The kitten looks great, but there's things maybe that we're gonna need or want more one day, but we trade those away for what we want now. We've been talking about this whole idea that our choices matter. The things that we choose matter. And then ultimately that God has invited us to step into a kind of life that is fulfilling, that's rich, that's an abundant kind of life, and that means we're gonna have to make some choices. And so what we've been doing real practically over the last several weeks is we've just been looking at 4 different choices that we're gonna have to make if you and I are serious about stepping more fully into the life that God is inviting us into. And so today, I just wanna talk about that final choice that we're gonna talk about. And in particular, I wanna talk about something related to how we spend our time. The choices we make related to how we prioritize our time, how we schedule our time. And here's the choice we're gonna have to make. I choose important over urgent. That's what you're gonna have to choose. I'm gonna have to choose that. If we're serious about stepping more fully in the life that God is inviting us to, at some point related to our schedule, related to how we spend our time, we're gonna have to choose what's more important over what's most urgent. The urgent are the things in our life that tend to come up in front of us. They clamor for our attention. We've got tons of diapers to change. We've got kids to run around. We've got meetings to be at. We've got texts to respond to. We've got people who need our attention. We've got a million things we gotta get done, and they all scream urgent. And what happens is, if we're not careful, we can chase the urgent, what feels like it's urgent, all over the place, neglecting the things that are actually most important. This happens all the time. And there's a price we pay with this. Some of us know what this feels like because we feel this. There's a price that comes with just always living in the urgent. Let me just talk about 2 sort of costs that come with this. Here's the first one. Living in the urgent depletes us. Living in the urgent depletes us. Some of us know this. The reality is some of us, we get home to the people who matter most in our life after a long day, and we have nothing left in the tank. We're depleted. Why? Because we've been chasing urgent all day long, and we have nothing left to give. And because we've been chasing urgent, we've been living in the urgent, we are fatigued. And because we're fatigued, we're more irritable. And because we're more irritable, we're more apathetic. And because we're more apathetic, the people around us think that we're just disengaged. It has a price to it. Here's a second sort of cost to just living in the urgent. When we live in the urgent, we maximize our minutes at the expense of moments. We get really efficient and maximize our minutes, but we may be doing that at the expense of moments. Let me tell you what I mean by this. You ever realize or think about the idea that there's a difference between minutes and moments? There's a difference between minutes and moments. In fact, if you were having a conversation with someone and they, in the middle of the conversation, they said something like, so what are the most impactful minutes of your life? You would kind of scratch your head and look at them like they're a little bit funny, like that question doesn't even make sense. I mean, most impactful minutes. But if they were to reframe that question and they were to say to you, what are some of the most impactful moments of your life? All of a sudden that question makes sense, doesn't it? Because you know what they're talking about. They're not just talking about minutes, they're talking about something deeper. Moments have substance, moments have meaning, and moments happen within minutes, but they're so much deeper than just time. And we can get, when we're chasing the urgent, we can get really good at being efficient and maximizing the minutes, but we may be missing the moments that are right in front of us. I've shared with some of you before, this was a very formative experience for me. Years ago, my daughter was a little girl, Sienna. She was probably 3 or 4 years old. And I came home one afternoon, and right before I come home, I got this email from someone, and this email was not a nice email. So the whole time I'm driving home, I'm thinking about my response and what I'm gonna do. I get home, I open up my laptop, I start cranking out a response to this email. Sienna hasn't seen me all day long. She comes in the back door, first words out of her mouth, she goes, Dad, you gotta come see this bug. I saw this bug outside. I've never seen a bug like this. You gotta come see this bug. And so I say, hey, Sienna, just give me 1 second. 1 second, I'll come out there. By the way, our kids know what 1 second means. It's not 1 second. 5 minutes later, she comes back. She says, Dad, please come see this bug. You gotta see this thing. I've never seen a bug like this. And I said, Sienna, just give me a minute. 1 more minute, okay? Just give me a minute. 5 minutes later, she comes back. She says, Dad, I think this bug's gonna fly away. I really want you to see this. And this time when I responded, I could see the life drain out of this little 3-year-old girl. Because this time I snapped and said, Sienna, leave me alone. I've got to finish this. Because it's urgent. And I was responding to the urgent, and I was really good at maximizing my minutes. I was getting the work done. And I lost a moment. It was right in front of me. Come on, guys. Some of you know what this feels like. Some of you have done this. You've traded in your minutes. You've traded in your moments for your minutes. Some of you have been on the receiving end of this. And here's the thing. This happens this is just a rule of life when it comes to, if we're gonna chase the urgent. You know what's interesting? If we're gonna always chase the urgent, here's the kicker, choosing the urgent over the important now almost always ends up in an emergency later. Choosing to just chase the urgent over the important now usually leads to an emergency later. And isn't it interesting that when an emergency finally hits us, due to the way we've been spending our time or the things we've been neglecting, that all of a sudden the things we didn't have time for back then, we suddenly have time for? Isn't it interesting how it works? That the important things that we didn't have time for now do. When your marriage is tanking, that's an emergency. And all of a sudden, we have time for counseling. But we didn't have time for it back here. But we do now. When your kid is going off the rail, that's an emergency. And you didn't have time to spend with them here, but all of a sudden, magically, there's time to spend with them. And when we have our health condition based on some of the decisions we've been making or bad decisions we've been making regarding to our physical health and diet and all that, and we have a heart attack or whatever it is, isn't it interesting? All of a sudden we have time to exercise. We didn't have it back here. And guys, let me just tell you the burden for today. Here's my burden. I'm gonna just put it on the table for you. I don't want it to take an emergency in your life to open your eyes to what's most important. I just don't want it to have to be an emergency for you to finally open your eyes to see what's important over what's urgent. And I don't think it has to be that way. I don't think we have to get to the point where it takes an emergency for that to happen. And I don't think you want that either. And so today, I just want to look at one really big idea that I think can paint the way forward for any of us who say, man, I want to choose important over urgent. And this idea kind of comes from this story where these two women had this encounter with Jesus, and they could not have more different perspectives on this encounter that they have with Jesus and the different priorities in which they have this encounter. Like they have completely different priorities in this moment. This is what happens. This is in Luke chapter 10. It says, as Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. How many of you guys, by the way, are clean freaks, like neat freaks? When someone comes over, you're like uber clean freak, right? You pull out the toothbrushes, you start scrubbing the floorboards, you're that kind of person, right? But when you're doing that, at least someone can say to you, come on, relax. It's not like Jesus is coming over. Jesus is coming over. So Martha's wigging out a little bit, right? She's got the toothbrush, she's got the Q-tips out, she's going around all the little crevices and all that, right? Totally different perspective from Mary. Mary was her sister, so this is not Mary, the mother of Jesus, this is another Mary. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, not helping, listening to what he taught. Well, this kind of gets Martha worked up a little bit. Martha was what? Distracted, urgent, distracted. Gotta get this done, distracted. Gotta make sure this is ready. She was distracted by the big dinner that she was preparing. So make the most of her minutes. Look what happens next. So she came to Jesus and she said, Lord, and I bet this was awkward, by the way, because Mary is sitting right here in front of this conversation. Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister, her, right there, that one, that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come help me. Jesus ain't playing this game, so he says, the Lord told her, my dear Martha, you've missed the point. You are worried and upset over all these details. By the way, isn't that where living in the urgent always leads us? Anxiety, being worried, being upset, always on to the next thing because we live so hurried, because the urgent's always clamoring for us. Jesus continued on, he said, there's only one thing worth being concerned about, and Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. It's almost like Jesus is saying, Martha, 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 the urgent has distracted you from what's most important. You've gotten distracted, and you're all worked up. The urgent has robbed you of what's most important, but Mary's chosen important over urgent. Martha, it's like he's saying, Martha, 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 listen, you're thinking minutes, but Mary is thinking moments. And she realizes she's in the middle of one, and she's prioritized that. But you've missed the point. And it's almost like Jesus is driving home this one organizing principle, even in the way that we prioritize our time. Because they've got this time in front of them, but how they're going to respond at this time. And it's almost like there's this one big overarching organizing principle that is incredibly helpful for any of us who want to choose important over urgent. You know what it is? It's this. Do first what matters most. Choose to do first what matters most. With your schedule, with your time, with your priorities. Do first what matters most. I feel like I'm about to go all Bill Nye the Science Guy on you, but this is not like a science experiment, so nothing's gonna blow up, I don't think. I always add that caveat. But here's the thing. Think about these two jars for a second, because this is helpful. You know, when this idea of do first what matters most, this is helpful for me to kind of get my head around what that really means and the impact that can have. Think about these two jars right here as an allotment of time in your life. So this is an allotment of time you've been given. So this can be the allotment of time you've been given in a day, allotment of time you have in a week, the allotment of time you have in a year, the allotment of time you have in your entire life. This is an allotment of time. All of these little white beads, these little pebbles here, these are all the things that sometimes feel urgent. They're little things. We probably wouldn't even say they're that important, but we fill our time with them. And sometimes they feel like they're urgent, but they're really, I mean, if you were honest, they're kind of a waste. Like this is all the time you spend shopping on Amazon. Here's when you binge watch Stranger Things. Here's when you did it the second time because you didn't understand it the first time. Here's your hobbies that you're involved with. I don't know what they are, golf, whatever it might be. And none of these are bad, right? They're just, we would say they're not the most meaningful things, and yet they fill up a ton of our time. And then we've got things that are really meaningful. That's why these are rocks, because they have a lot of weight, they have substance. We would say that these are really meaningful. Like, so this is family, like time with our family. And, you know, if you're married, you know, with your spouse, and work, kind of an important one. And so you want to do meaningful work. Make sure that that's there. And then if you're a student, you've got studying, right? For some of you, that should probably be a really small rock, but whatever, I've got it right there. For some of you, it's just spiritual life. You'd say that's incredibly meaningful, right? So that's church and being in a group and serving and all that. And then for some of you, it's health. You'd say health, right? So emotional and physical health. So let me ask you a question. You ever felt like this? Where you don't have enough time, it's kind of spilling over, and you're like, I don't have enough time to get all this done. And what happens is we get to you ever got to the end of a day or the end of the week or the end of a year? Or maybe some of you, you're beginning to get to the end of the final seasons of your life, and you're sitting there going, it didn't all fit. And the most meaningful things, the most important things, they didn't fit. But you know, this isn't the only way to think about our time. Because there's another way of thinking about it where you don't try to add those things in, where you begin to structure around them in your family, in your marriage, and you know, the work that you're a part of, that you're doing, and the meaningful stuff you're trying to contribute, and taking care of yourself and your spiritual life and all that. And then all this stuff is still there, right? Netflix, shopping on Amazon, Netflix, driving around neighborhoods looking at houses you can't afford. Someone really laughed at that. Now, here's what's interesting. Let me just get all of them out there. It's all a matter of prioritizing. And I promise you, there are people that you look at, and you look at their life and you think, how do they get it all done? And you look at their life and they have peace. And you look at their life and they have like the things that matter most. You're like, man, they just have so much joy. They're not chasing urgent. They're at peace actually. And you look at them and you're like, they must have more time than me. Here's a little trick, here's a little hint. They don't have more time. We all have the same allotment of time. Do you know what they've done? They live by this one simple idea right here. They do first what matters most. And everything else can find its way around that. And it changes. It changes how we prioritize. It changes how we structure our time. Because they do first what matters most. So let me ask you a question. What matters most to you? This may be the most important question you could just ask today. What matters most? What are the rocks for you? The things you would say, they have to go in first. Everything else needs to find its way around that, but these things have to go in first. Have you ever even considered that? You see, sometimes I think the reason why we chase urgent so much or feel like we can't say no to the things that feel like they're urgent is because we don't even know what we've said yes to. We don't even know the kind of life we've said. We don't even know what the rocks are. And if you're here today and maybe you're not a Christian, maybe you're skeptical, or maybe you're exploring, you're not skeptical, you're just exploring, you're checking this thing out, but you don't know where you land on the whole Jesus thing. Here's what I'd say. I think for you, maybe one of the most valuable things you could do today would be to just write a list. I think that'd be extraordinarily helpful, just to go write a list. What are the things that matter most to you? You can take that list and start to schedule around that. You can share it with others. You don't even have to tell them you got it from Jesus. You can just say, hey, I come up with this list. I want to start scheduling around this. But if you're here today and you're a Christian, here's why this matters. And let me just tell you some good news. Jesus gave us the cheat code on this one. Jesus actually told us, here's what matters most. Here are the rocks that need to go in first. And let everything else kind of revolve around that, but here are the rocks that need to go in first. And we know he told us this because this guy comes up to him and basically asks him, Jesus, what's most important? The way he says, what's the most important command? And the commands in the first century were what they oriented their life around, what they oriented their time around, what they oriented their energy around. And he says, what's most important? Jesus says, oh, that's easy. Ready? Love God, love others. Love God, love others. Those rocks have to go in first. Love God, love others. So here's what I want to do. I just want to talk real quickly about what does that mean for us? If we want to put those rocks in first, how do you do that? How do you build time? How do you prioritize time around loving God and loving others? And how might that change the way we actually spend our time? Let's think about this first one for a second. When you said, love God, what would that look like to put that rock in first before everything else? And it's interesting to me that Jesus said, love God, not obey God, not even follow God. Both of those are kind of cold ideas. Love is relational. Love is intimate. Love is dynamic. And I hope that this idea doesn't get lost on you, because I think sometimes we throw out these ideas like, well, love God or whatever, and every now and then I think we throw out ideas like this so often that the power of them loses. It kind of becomes background noise and background music. But man, do not miss the significance of this statement, that this idea that you can love God, that there is a God. And some of you, you've never even heard this idea. This is new to you. There is a God who created you. That you have a heavenly Father, you have a God who, like the scriptures say, stitched you together in your mother's womb. That you have been uniquely designed by God. That God knows every fiber of your being. That God has made you with intention and made you with purpose and made you with meaning. And that the God who breathed life into you, the God who spoke and whole galaxies are created, the God whose energy makes the universe go, that God loves you. And that God says, I want you to know me. And I want to know you. I want to have a relationship with you. Now just think about this for a second. How are relationships formed? That's not a trick question. How are relationships formed? Time together. By spending time together, right? It's one way. To be in each other's presence, to listen, to hear, to communicate, to share life. And it's no different in forming a thriving, dynamic relationship with God, to spend time with God. I've told some of you before, about 9 years ago, if you would have had the ability to just kind of open up my soul and to look inside of me, into my interior life, it wouldn't have been a pretty scene. You would have seen a really barren and desolate landscape inside of me. Spiritually just bone dry. And I remember it kind of came to a boiling point one weekend when I was actually speaking and was coming here to speak. And I remember getting about a mile from the church and seeing the church, and I just broke down weeping because I knew I've got nothing to say. I'm depleted. I got nothing to say. And that moment really kind of sent me to go back to the drawing board of my life, and I began to look at patterns I'd fallen into, and I began to take inventory of my life. And one of the things that struck me as I began to look at even my days and my time, is I realized that for years leading up to that moment, for years, every single morning, the very first thing I did when I would wake up, the very first thing I did, sometimes before my feet hit the ground, I would check emails, urgent. And I would respond to those emails, urgent, and I would respond to texts, urgent, and I would go on my social media feed and do all that, urgent. The very first energy of my day for years went to the urgent, to work, to producing, to doing something. And so I just made a really simple decision. And this one simple decision, I'm not kidding when I say it changed my life. I just decided that if I want to take seriously that God rock to start there, then that means I need to make some changes. And so I just decided that every day I'm going to give my first energy to God, to spend time with God. I'm going to give my first energy to point it in a divine direction. And so for me, it's really, really simple. It's really not that complicated. I just kind of found a chair. Still to this day, I have a chair. I go to the same chair. I think there's something important about routine. I grab a Bible, and I set aside about 10 minutes, and I just listen to God, and I pray, and I talk to God, and it changes the trajectory of my day, and it has changed my life. It breathed life back into me. And I realize for some of you, if I were to peek in or someone else were to peek into the interior of your life, they would see a desolate landscape as well. And maybe could it be that the urgent has crowded out the important? And that first rock maybe that needs to go in is to come back and start spending time with God. In fact, I think for some of you, the most important decision you're going to make coming out of today is that tomorrow you're going to choose to give the first energy of your day to point in divine direction. You're going to find a chair. I think for some of you, this is going to be the most important decision you make today is you're going to tomorrow find a chair, you're going to grab a Bible, you're going to set aside some minutes and you're just going to listen to God. You're going to spend time with God. And if you need help with that, you can go to our website. You can also go to our app. We've got a Bible reading plan. If you're like, I don't even know where to start reading the Bible, you can go to get our Bible reading plan. We've actually had over 300,000 people download our Bible reading plan, so that'll make it really, really simple. And here's what's going to happen. Here's what I can promise you is going to happen. If you take Jesus up on this invitation, put that God rock, spending time with God, to love God, to develop a relationship with God, if you put that rock in first, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get to a certain point where you do that, and you're going to come out of the morning and you're going to go, I didn't get anything out of that. It may only be after 2 days. And I would probably tell you that the majority of my times after I leave my chair, I'm sitting there going, I don't think I got anything out of that. But you know what struck me? I don't measure the value of any other relationship based on that standard. In other words, when's the last time you spent time with your kid and someone said, how did it go? And you're like, I don't know if I really got anything out of it. When's the last time you said, how's your marriage going? I don't know if I'm really getting anything out of it. No, we don't hold any other relationship and value to that kind of standard. The point is to be together. The point is that you show up. Mary is sitting at his feet. She's just showing up, saying, I'm here because I love you. I'm here because you love me. I'm here because I want to know you more deeply. That's the point, is that you keep showing up. Jesus says, that rock goes first. And that's the invitation. But he doesn't just leave it. He said, love God. If you're wondering, like, what are the rocks? He didn't just leave it there. He also said, love others. To love others. Isn't it interesting in that story a moment ago that Martha's inability to see the important and instead choose the urgent created relational tension between her and her sister? She's there griping about her sisters. It's created some sort of friction in their relationship. And that's because the urgent will always crowd out the most important relationships. The urgent creates tension in relationships. If you are at work and you choose processes over people, the urgent is winning at the expense of that. If your kids have to compete for your attention between, them and the mobile device that you have, the urgent is winning. If your spouse has to compete for your attention, the urgent is winning. And let me just kind of lean into families here for a second. Let me just take a time out and camp out on families for 1 second. Because I don't know if you've ever thought about this or not. But every other role that you play in someone else's life outside of your family, every other role you play in someone else's life can ultimately be replaced by someone else outside of your family. If you're a teacher, your students can get a new teacher. If you're a boss, your employees, they can get a new boss. But your kids have one father, and it's you. And your kids have one mother, and it's you. And your spouse has one husband or one wife, and it's you. And the reason I get worked up about this, because I've just seen this happen too much, and it just saddens me, to be honest with you. Is that what I've seen is oftentimes that family rock is typically one of the first ones to get crowded out by the urgent. And let me just press in a tiny bit further. And I just feel like I want to tell you this because I love you. And I don't want an emergency to be the thing that opens your eyes to this. But guys, listen. What good would it be? What good would it be to work so hard at the expense of your family to get that dream vacation if 3 years from now you don't have a family to enjoy it with? What good would it be to chase the urgent, and because of that, you're getting recognized and you're getting promoted, you're getting all that kind of stuff. What good would it be to chase all that just so you can stay in the dream home if no one wants to be in the home? I get it, guys. I get it. I'm in the game with you here. I'm a pastor. I got responsibilities just like you, and I got a lot of urgent things coming at me just like you. I get that. But one decision I made a long time ago that just kind of has helped me with this, to make sure I don't get these priorities backwards, is I only have one calendar. I don't have a family calendar and a work calendar. I just have one calendar. And that's very intentional for me. Because I put all my family stuff, because I want to know when I'm scheduling out work-related things and ministry-related things, I want to know as well that I'm not going to be crowding out that family rock either. And so can I just encourage you? Build your calendar around who you want to become. And the truth is, for so many of us, we build our calendars around what we want to get done. That's an urgency mindset. Don't just build your calendar around what you want to get done. Build your calendar around who you want to become. That will change the things that go on there and the priorities. Guys, I just don't want you to wake up one day and realize you got these jars mixed up and you didn't have enough time for the things that mattered most. So let me just ask you again, what do you want most? What matters most to you? And I think that I can promise you that you're going to have a decision maybe by the end of this day, this week. You're going to have a decision in front of you where your choice, important over urgent, your choice will either lead you towards stepping closer to what you want most and the rocks that you prioritize, or stepping away from it and letting the urgent win. And here's what I can guarantee you this. Spending an extra 7 minutes with your daughter will not feel urgent. Won't feel urgent. Asking your parents how their week is going because you want to invest in a relationship with them, I promise you, that will not feel urgent. Setting aside the first moments of your day to spend time with God, to find your chair, to grab a Bible and just point your thoughts in a divine direction, I can promise you this, that will not feel urgent. But those just might be the most important things you do. Let me pray for us. God, I'm just so grateful for such practical wisdom you give us, Jesus. How you really do have a better life for us. And that's not a cliche, it's just true. Man, you just lead us into such better ways. And so, God, I pray this week that we make the choice of important over urgent. God, when those urgent things clamor for our attention, I pray that we would prioritize well. I pray, God, that for any of us today, I know some of us are here and we feel like that first jar, we feel like we've kind of messed this up and we've been prioritizing urgent over important. I pray that for any of us who are here today and feel that way, God, would you remind us today, would you just encourage us that it's not too late to start again? Would you just remind us that tomorrow's a new day? We can make different choices tomorrow. And those choices can lead us more deeply into what you're inviting us into. God, I pray that as we do this, as we choose important over urgent when it comes to our time, I pray that you fill us up with joy and peace in profound ways. And I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen.